Your soulmate left you one final letter. What it says will break your heart. My beloved child, your soulmate left something behind for you. One final letter carrying words they could never bring themselves to say when the moment was right. And the strangest part is not that this letter exists. It is the sentence hidden near the end, the sentence they rewrote again and again because every version felt too small for what they truly wanted you to understand. Don't skip. There is a reason this message reached you now. Your soulmate had been holding back a truth about you, about their feelings, and about a decision that quietly changed everything inside their heart. They remembered moments you probably thought meant nothing, the way you stayed kind when nobody noticed, the way you carried yourself through difficult days, and the little things about you that somehow remained in their mind long after everything became quiet. But when they finally sat down to write this letter, they realized something heartbreaking. They had spent so much time waiting for the perfect moment that they almost allowed the most important words to remain unspoken forever. Stay till the end, because what they wrote next changes the meaning of this entire letter. There is one line in that letter they almost removed. It begins with a confession. I wish you knew what you became to me before I learned how to say it. And from there, everything becomes deeper. Your soulmate admits that there were moments when they wanted to reach out, moments when your name appeared in their thoughts unexpectedly, and moments when they imagined finally sitting across from you and telling you everything without hiding behind hesitation. Something huge is waiting for you, because this is where the letter reveals something you were never supposed to discover this way. They were not trying to forget you. They were trying to become brave enough to face what they felt. Every silence you questioned, every strange distance you noticed, every moment that seemed impossible to understand had another side you couldn't see. Don't skip, because the next part of their letter contains the words that made them stop writing for a long time before continuing. If I could return to one moment, I would return to the moment I first realized you mattered to me, and this time, I would not stay silent. But that still isn't the final revelation. Near the bottom of the page, your soulmate writes something so unexpected that it changes the entire reason this letter was written. They confess that this was never meant to be a simple goodbye. It was meant to leave you with the truth they were too afraid to leave unsaid. They wanted you to know that meeting you changed something permanent inside them, that your presence became connected to memories they could never replace, and that no matter how much time passed, there was one question they could never stop asking themselves. What would have happened if I had simply told you sooner? Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, because there is still one final section of the letter, and your soulmate saved the most emotional truth for those last few lines. They wrote your name there. Underneath it, they placed a sentence they had never said to you before. And once you hear what that sentence says, you will finally understand why they called this their final letter. There is a reason your soulmate saved these words for the very end of the letter. After writing your name, they stopped for a moment, as though everything they had been hiding suddenly became impossible to keep inside. Then came the sentence they had never found the courage to say before. You were never just someone I cared about. You became the person my heart kept choosing, even when I tried to convince myself to move forward. Don't skip. Because immediately after that confession, the letter takes an unexpected turn. Your soulmate admits that they kept remembering the smallest details about you, conversations you may have forgotten, moments when you smiled without realizing they were watching, and words you once said that stayed with them far longer than you could imagine. They confess that whenever they pictured the future, somehow you kept appearing in it. But there was something else, something they deliberately kept hidden because they feared that telling you would change everything. Stay till the end, because that secret is exactly why this became their final letter. What comes next is the part they struggled most to write. Your soulmate reveals that there was a moment when they almost told you everything. They had already imagined the words. They had already decided they would stop hiding. But when the opportunity arrived, fear won. And ever since that moment, one thought has followed them. What if you were waiting for me too? Something huge is waiting for you, because they finally admit that your silence never made them stop caring, it made them wonder whether. Both of you were standing on opposite sides of the same unfinished story, each waiting for the other person to speak first. And then comes another confession. If you ever believed you were easy for me to forget, you were wrong. You became the memory I compared everything else to. Don't skip, because the letter suddenly becomes even more personal. Your soulmate says there is one memory involving you that they have never shared with anyone, and that memory is connected to the exact day they realized their feelings had become impossible to ignore. And then, just when you think you understand everything, the final lines on this page reveal something completely different. Your soulmate writes, "This letter is final only because I cannot keep speaking through silence anymore." Those words change everything. This was never written because their feelings disappeared. It was written because hiding those feelings had become harder than admitting them. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. Your soulmate says that if these words ever reached you, there was one thing they desperately wanted you to understand. You were not an ordinary chapter in their life. You were the person who made them question every excuse they had ever used to protect their heart. And before the page ends, they leave one unfinished sentence. "The day I realized I truly loved you is the day you." The rest continues on the next page, and what happened on that day explains why your soulmate could never look at you the same way again. The next page begins with a memory your soulmate never expected to confess. "The day I realized I truly loved you was the day you showed me kindness, when you had absolutely nothing to gain from it." They remembered your expression, your words, and the quiet way you made them feel seen without even knowing what was happening inside their heart. Don't skip, because this is where the letter becomes deeply personal. Your soulmate writes that something changed in that exact moment. Suddenly, you were no longer simply someone they thought about occasionally. You became someone they feared losing before they had even found the courage to tell you how much you meant. They went home carrying that realization, replaying the moment again and again, wondering how one person could unknowingly become so important. Stay till the end, because what they admit next is something they kept completely hidden. After that day, they began writing messages to you that they never sent. Some were only a few words. Others contained everything they wished they could say. And one of those unsent messages contained a confession that eventually became the heart of this final letter. But there was another reason they stayed silent. Your soulmate admits they were afraid you might never see them the same way. They wondered whether speaking honestly could destroy the connection they treasured, so they chose silence and slowly discovered that silence had its own price. Something huge is waiting for you, because they reveal that whenever you seemed distant, they secretly questioned whether they had waited too long. Whenever you seemed happy, they hoped someone was giving you the care they had been too hesitant to offer. Yet beneath all those thoughts remained one impossible question. What if the story between you was never meant to end there? Don't skip. Your soulmate then writes a line they almost crossed out. "I kept waiting for a sign from you while never realizing that maybe you were waiting for one from me." That realization changed everything. Suddenly, every unfinished conversation, every meaningful glance, and every strangely timed moment returned to their mind with a completely different meaning. Then the letter reaches the confession they had been building toward from the beginning. "There is something I never told anyone about you." Stay till the end. Your soulmate explains that long before writing this final letter, they made a private promise to themselves. If they ever received one genuine opportunity to speak to you again, they would stop pretending their feelings were smaller than they really were. They would tell you what your presence changed inside them. They would tell you why certain memories never faded. And most importantly, they would finally answer the question they had avoided for so long. Something huge is waiting for you, because underneath that promise they wrote 7 words that completely changed the direction of this story. "I never actually wanted to say goodbye." And beneath those words is another sentence, one that reveals what your soulmate truly wants to happen after you finish reading this final letter. What your soulmate writes next changes the meaning of every page that came before it. Beneath the words, "I never actually wanted to say goodbye," they finally reveal what they truly wanted. "I wanted one honest chance to tell you what you meant to me before silence decided our story for us." Don't skip. Because this is where the letter stops sounding like an ending and starts feeling like a confession that arrived almost too late. Your soulmate admits they called it a final letter because they were finished hiding behind unfinished sentences, missed opportunities, and words they kept rewriting but never sending. They remember how many times they nearly reached out to you, only to convince themselves that tomorrow would be easier. But tomorrow kept becoming another tomorrow, until they realized something painful. The perfect moment they were waiting for might never arrive unless they created it themselves. Stay till the end, because the next line reveals the one thing they secretly hoped you would understand without ever being told. Every time I pulled away, part of me was hoping you would somehow notice that my heart was still standing exactly where I left it, with you. Then comes a revelation they had never admitted before. Your soulmate writes that they once tried imagining a future where you became nothing more than a distant memory, but something about that picture never felt complete. Certain songs reminded them of conversations with you. Ordinary places brought back unexpected memories. Even quiet moments carried questions they thought they had already answered. Something huge is waiting for you, because they finally realized they were not holding onto an illusion, they were holding onto everything they had never honestly expressed. Don't skip. They write, maybe you never knew how important you became because I became too good at pretending everything was normal. And then the letter becomes even more emotional. They apologize, not for caring about you, but for allowing uncertainty to speak louder than their heart. They admit that if you ever questioned whether you mattered, their silence may have given you the wrong answer. But inside them, the answer had always been different. You mattered more than they knew how to explain. The final paragraph on this page contains something completely unexpected. Your soulmate says there is one last truth they have been saving, not about the past, but about what they secretly wished could happen next. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, because they write, if life ever places us in the same moment again, I will not waste it pretending I have nothing to say. They promise themselves that this time there will be no rehearsed speech, no perfect words, and no hiding behind fear. There will only be honesty. But just beneath that promise, your soulmate leaves another revelation. Before writing this letter, they made one decision involving you, a decision they believed they would never be brave enough to make. Don't skip, because they refuse to reveal it immediately. Instead, they leave one mysterious sentence at the bottom of the page. By the time you understand why I wrote this, I may already have done the one thing I kept postponing. And what that one thing is could change everything you thought this final letter meant. The decision your soulmate made was not to disappear, it was to finally stop running from the truth. Before finishing this letter, they decided that if another genuine opportunity ever appeared between you, they would meet it with honesty instead of hesitation. Don't skip, because the letter reveals something they had kept private for longer than you realize. They had imagined speaking to you again countless times. They imagined hearing your voice, seeing your reaction, and finally saying the sentence that always became impossible whenever the moment felt real. But this time, something inside them changed. They wrote, I spent too long wondering what you might say, when I should have been brave enough to tell you what I needed to say. Stay till the end, because beneath those words comes a confession that makes the entire letter feel different. They were never waiting for their feelings to disappear. They were waiting to become courageous enough to admit that those feelings remained. And then your soulmate reveals the memory they could never erase. It wasn't some grand event. It was an ordinary moment when you looked at them with a warmth they weren't expecting, and for a few seconds everything felt strangely simple. Something huge is waiting for you, because they confess that they replayed that tiny moment whenever they questioned whether what they felt was real. You probably forgot it, they wrote, but I never did. Don't skip. That sentence is followed by something even deeper. Your soulmate admits that they once began writing another letter to you, but stopped halfway because it felt too vulnerable. They kept that unfinished letter hidden, and one sentence from it eventually found its way into this final message. If you ever wonder whether someone noticed the beautiful things about you that nobody applauded, I did. Suddenly, their silence carries a different meaning. They noticed more than they showed. They remembered more. Then they admitted. And they cared far more deeply than their actions ever explained. But the biggest revelation is still waiting. Near the end of the page, your soulmate writes that there is one reason they chose this exact moment to finally put everything into words. Stay till the end. They recently realized that waiting indefinitely could turn something meaningful into nothing more than a question they would carry forever. So they made themselves a promise. No more imaginary conversations, no more unsent words, no more pretending that you were simply another memory. Something huge is waiting for you, because the final sentence on this page reveals that this final letter contains something you haven't reached yet, a second message written beneath the original ending. Your soulmate almost removed it completely, but they left it there because it contains the truth they were most afraid for you to know. And it begins with 5 unforgettable words. If you still feel something, those 5 words were followed by a sentence your soulmate had rewritten more times than anything else in the letter. If you still feel something. Please know that I never wanted our story to become a collection of things we were too afraid to say. Don't skip. This is the moment where their final letter becomes something far more powerful than a goodbye. Your soulmate admits that somewhere beneath all the distance and unanswered questions, they secretly wondered whether a small part of you still remembered what existed between you. They weren't asking you to erase the past or pretend everything had been perfect. They simply wanted you to know the truth. You mattered. You mattered during the quiet moments, during the confusing moments, and even during the moments when their actions may have suggested otherwise. Stay till the end, because they write something next that they had never admitted aloud. There were days when I almost reached out just because something beautiful happened and you were still the first person I wanted to tell. But then the letter becomes even more revealing. Your soulmate describes all the tiny moments when they nearly broke their silence, a familiar place, a memory appearing unexpectedly, a sentence someone said that reminded them of you. Something huge is waiting for you, because they confess that each time this happened, they would begin imagining what they would say if you were standing in front of them. Not some dramatic speech, just the truth. I miss the version of myself that existed when I could talk to you without measuring every word. Don't skip. They admit that losing that simplicity taught them something they understood far too late. Sometimes the person who changes your heart does it quietly. There is no announcement. No perfect moment. One day you simply realize that their absence feels different from everyone else's. And your soulmate says that realization came to them when they tried to imagine never speaking to you again. For the first time, they understood exactly how much remained unfinished. Then comes the sentence that made them hesitate before completing the letter. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. Your soulmate writes, there is still one thing about us that you do not know, and maybe this is the only chance I will ever have to tell you. They explain that during one of the last meaningful moments you shared, they had already made a decision about you. They wanted to tell you exactly how they felt. They had even prepared the first words in their mind. But something happened in that moment that made them stop. Since then, they have wondered whether staying silent was the biggest missed opportunity of their story. And at the bottom of the page, they finally reveal what those first words would have been. Before you go, there is something you need to know about the way I feel when I look at you. But the sentence ends there. The rest is waiting on the next page, and your soulmate says what follows is the truth they protected more carefully than anything else. The next page begins exactly where your soulmate's courage once disappeared. When I look at you, I see the person who made me understand that some connections cannot be measured by how much was said, because sometimes the deepest feelings live inside everything that remained unspoken. Don't skip. Your soulmate admits that whenever they looked into your eyes, there was always another sentence sitting behind the ordinary words they gave you. When they asked how you were, they wanted to say they had been thinking about you. When they smiled and acted normal, they wanted to tell you that your presence could change their entire mood. And whenever it was time to walk away, part of them wanted to ask you to stay just a little longer. Stay till the end, because the most surprising confession comes immediately afterward. I thought hiding my feelings would protect what we had. I never realized silence could become the very thing that separated us. That realization stayed with them, growing stronger every time another opportunity passed without the truth being spoken. Then your soulmate reveals something they had never written anywhere before. There was one night when they sat alone and imagined receiving a message from you. Nothing extraordinary, just your name appearing again. Something huge is waiting for you, because they admit that imagining that tiny moment made them realize how deeply they still cared. They began asking themselves what they would do if life unexpectedly gave them another chance. Would they repeat the same silence? Would they pretend everything had disappeared? Their answer surprised even them. No, they wrote. If I ever stand in front of you again, I want you to meet the honest version of me. Don't skip. They say they would finally tell you that you were remembered in places you had never visited with them, in moments you knew nothing about, and during ordinary days when there was absolutely no reason for your name to suddenly enter their thoughts. They tried explaining it away. They tried calling it nostalgia. But eventually they stopped arguing with what their heart had already understood. And now the letter reaches the secret your soulmate protected more carefully than anything else. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you. Beneath several crossed-out sentences, they finally write, I once made a wish about you, and nobody knows. They don't describe money, perfection, or some impossible dream. Their wish was surprisingly simple, that someday, somehow, both of you would have one completely honest conversation where neither person was afraid of the answer. Your soulmate says they never needed the past rewritten, they only wished the truth had been given a chance. But just beneath that confession comes the detail that changes everything again. They reveal that shortly before writing this final letter, something happened that reminded them of you so strongly that they could no longer ignore what they felt. It was connected to something you once said, words they thought they had forgotten until they heard almost the exact same sentence again. And when they heard it, only one thought entered their mind. I need to tell them the truth before another moment disappears. What you once said, and why they remembered it after all this time, is revealed on the next page. The words your soulmate suddenly remembered were simple, but they had quietly carried them for far longer than either of you realized. Some things deserve honesty, even when honesty arrives late. Don't skip. The moment they heard almost those exact words again, every memory connected to you seemed to return at once. Your soulmate writes that they suddenly remembered your voice, the expression on your face, and the strange feeling they had experienced when you originally said it. Back then, they didn't understand why those words affected them so deeply. Now they did. You had unknowingly given them the answer to the question they had been avoiding for so long. Stay till the end, because this realization became the reason they finally completed the letter instead of leaving another unfinished message hidden away. They write, maybe honesty arriving late cannot change yesterday, but it can finally stop yesterday from controlling tomorrow. And then comes the line they were most afraid to admit. The truth is, I never stopped wondering what we could have become. But your soulmate refuses to romanticize every moment. They admit there were misunderstandings, missed opportunities, and times when both of you may have interpreted silence differently. Something huge is waiting for you, because they reveal that the heartbreak inside this final letter is not simply about losing someone, it is about realizing how easily two people can care deeply while each believes the other person has already moved on. Don't skip. Your soulmate writes, I kept looking for proof that you cared while hiding every piece of proof that I cared. That sentence forced them to confront everything. They remembered moments when they deliberately kept conversations short because their feelings were becoming obvious. They remembered acting unaffected when they were anything but unaffected. And they remembered one particular goodbye when they wanted desperately to turn around and say something, yet kept walking. Stay till the end, because they finally reveal what they wanted to say that day. Please don't mistake my silence for indifference. You mean more to me than I know how to show. Then comes the part of the letter your soulmate says was hardest to leave behind. Something huge is waiting for you. They write that this final letter was never intended to make you chase the past. It was meant to give you something they should have given you much earlier, the truth without conditions. You deserve to know that you were valued. You deserve to know that you were remembered. And you deserve to know that my silence was never proof that you meant nothing. Don't skip. Beneath those words, however, is one final handwritten note that appears to have been added after the letter was already finished. The writing looks rushed, as though your soulmate suddenly remembered one last thing they could not leave unsaid. It reads, there is one reason I still believe our story may not have ended where we thought it did. And directly underneath, they mention a promise, something connected to you that they have quietly kept all this time. What that promise was changes the meaning of every word you have heard so far. The promise your soulmate kept was never written down until this moment. It was something they quietly made to themselves after one unforgettable conversation with you. If life ever gave them another genuine chance to speak from the heart, they would not hide behind silence again. Don't skip. Your soulmate writes, I promise myself that if our paths ever crossed at the right moment, I would finally tell you everything I was too afraid to say before. And suddenly, the final letter begins to feel less like an ending and more like the closing of one chapter before something entirely different can begin. Stay till the end, because your soulmate reveals that they almost broke this promise several times. They almost convinced themselves that too much time had passed, that perhaps you had forgotten, that maybe the safest choice was to leave everything untouched. But every time they tried, one thought returned. What if both of you walked away carrying the same unanswered question? Something huge is waiting for you, because they finally write that question in the center of the page. What if we were never missing love, only the courage to speak about it? That question changed how they remembered everything. Your soulmate began seeing old moments differently, not as proof that something was impossible, but as reminders of how much remained unsaid. Don't skip. They admit there was one conversation when you said something about your future, and without telling you, they imagined themselves being part of it. The thought surprised them so much that they immediately changed the subject. You probably never noticed, but your soulmate remembered. That was when I knew this had become bigger than a passing feeling, they confess. Stay till the end, because what follows is even more emotional. They write that they never needed a perfect version of you. They noticed your uncertainty, your quiet moments, your imperfections, and somehow those things made you feel more real, not less meaningful. You became unforgettable because you were simply yourself. And then comes the sentence they had apparently underlined twice: I did not fall for an idea of you. I cared for the person I actually saw. But there is still one final secret connected to that promise. Something huge is waiting for you. Your soulmate admits that before sealing this letter, they placed something beside it, a small reminder connected to a memory only the two of you would truly understand. They refuse to explain it immediately. Instead, they write, if you remember what this means, then you already know which moment I never forgot. Don't skip. That object represented the exact moment your soulmate realized they wanted more than memories. They wanted the chance to create new ones with you. Yet underneath this revelation is another line that completely shifts the story again. I thought this would be my final letter, but while writing it, I realized there is one question I cannot leave unanswered. Stay till the end, because your soulmate finally writes that question on the next page, and, depending on what your heart would say, this final letter may not actually be the ending they once believed it was. The question waiting on the next page is the one your soulmate had been avoiding from the very beginning. If we were given one more honest moment together, would you want to know everything I never told you? Don't skip. Your soulmate admits they stared at that sentence longer than any other line in the letter, because asking it meant finally accepting something they had tried to deny. Their heart was not searching for a perfect ending. It was searching for clarity. They didn't know what your answer would be, and they refused to pretend they could decide it for you. But they needed you to understand why the question existed. Stay till the end, because underneath it they write, I cannot change the moments when I stayed silent, but I can finally be honest about what that silence contained. And what follows is a confession more vulnerable than anything written before. You were the person they wanted to tell whenever something wonderful happened. You were the person whose opinion mattered when they pretended it didn't. And somehow, even after distance changed everything, memories of you continued appearing in places they never expected. Then the let reveals why they called this their final message. Something huge is waiting for you, because your soulmate explains that final never meant their feelings suddenly disappeared. It meant this would be the final time they allowed fear to speak for them. Don't skip. They write, after this page, I refuse to hide behind what-ifs. Whatever life decides, at least you will finally know the truth. And then they say something that would have been almost impossible for them to admit before. Caring about you changed me. Your soulmate says knowing you taught them that some people leave an impact without trying, that a few sincere moments can matter more than years of ordinary ones. And that sometimes you only understand someone's importance when you imagine a future in which you never speak again. Stay till the end. That thought was what finally pushed them to finish the letter. They could accept uncertainty, but they could no longer accept leaving you with the wrong idea about what you had meant to them. And just when the letter appears to be reaching its conclusion, you discover another folded page. Something huge is waiting for you. At the top, your soulmate has written, I wasn't going to include this. Don't skip. The words underneath are shorter, almost as if they were written without stopping to reconsider them. If you remember me honestly. Remember that I cared even when I struggled to show it. Remember that some of my quietest moments contained the loudest feelings. And please remember that meeting you was never something I regretted. But there is one final sentence beneath everything else, separated from the rest of the page. Stay till the end, because this sentence reveals that your soulmate has been keeping one last piece of information until the very end. There was a moment when you almost discovered everything, and you still don't know how close you came. What happened during that moment, and what your soulmate nearly confessed, is the secret waiting behind the final pages of this letter. That moment happened during a conversation you probably never realized was important. Your soulmate remembers standing there, listening to you speak, while one thought repeated inside their mind, tell them now. Don't skip. They were seconds away from revealing everything. They had already chosen the words. They wanted to tell you that your presence had become one of the brightest parts of their ordinary days, that hearing from you mattered more than they ever showed, and that whenever you disappeared into your own world, they noticed the emptiness you left behind. But just before they could speak, the moment changed. The conversation moved somewhere else, and your soulmate smiled as though nothing had happened. Stay till the end, because what you never knew is that afterward they replayed those few seconds endlessly, wondering how different everything might have become if they had simply finished that sentence. Something huge is waiting for you, because the letter finally reveals exactly what they almost said. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but I know I want you somewhere inside it. Those words remained hidden until this letter. Your soulmate writes that carrying them silently taught them something they wish they had understood sooner. Waiting can feel safe, but sometimes waiting quietly becomes a decision of its own. Don't skip. They had believed there would always be another conversation, another perfect opening, another chance when everything would suddenly feel easier. Yet every postponed confession made the next one harder. And then comes one of the most emotional lines in the entire letter. I kept saving my truth for the perfect day until I realized the perfect day was every day I still had the chance to tell you. Stay till the end. Your soulmate admits they cannot return to those moments, but they can finally stop pretending those moments meant nothing. They meant everything. Your kindness mattered. Your presence mattered. Even the smallest memories mattered. And somewhere between all those ordinary moments, your soulmate says their feelings became something they could no longer explain away. But the letter still has one sealed section left. Something huge is waiting for you. Across the fold, your soulmate wrote only 4 words. Read this part last. Don't skip. Inside, there is no long explanation, no attempt to make the past perfect, and no complicated speech. Instead, your soulmate leaves the truth in its simplest form. If this really is the last thing you ever hear from my heart, then I need you to know that knowing you changed something in me for the better. They continue by saying they hope you never measure your worth by somebody else's inability to express what they feel. And then, beneath that, comes the revelation that makes the entire letter suddenly feel unfinished again. Stay till the end, because your soulmate writes, but before I close this forever, there is one